operating officer and acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection in the Trump administration. It's our friend Mark Morgan, and I was looking at some of the data because he's been covering this whole story. He's also a visiting fellow in the Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, and we wanted to get Mark's take on this continuing border crisis because, you know, I made mention a little bit ago about the Fast and Furious crisis and how, or the gun walking program and how that was used to actually justify gun control. Well, now it seems like it's another hurt and rescue mission from the government. They've created a problem, and now we have to spend taxpayer dollars to actually not solve the problem. Mark joins us now. Mark, it's good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Dan, for having me. This is a very critical, important issue for the country, as you stated.
Yeah, very much so. I just wanted to run some numbers by you because I was looking at this piece that was written by, well, it comes from a couple of different sources, Associated Press, Raisin Magazine as well. More than 4,500 immigrant children and teens held in tents on just one military base, for example, and hundreds of senior federal employees that are basically acting, in their words, as babysitters at the facility, not given a lot of training for that specific task, et cetera. This problem, the problem of safety, the problem of being able to just accommodate the number of people coming in, we did not see this under the previous administration. Now, granted, we saw, especially during peak like spring, we would see examples of, you know, increased border crossings and children that were coming across the border. But I mean, it was, I heard one Border Patrol agent say this was like overnight, that all of a sudden more and more people, after the migrant protocol protection, all of this stuff was pushed back. The numbers just exploded by quite a bit. Do we have, Mark, any chance? I mean, do we have any expectation that these numbers are going to decrease after the spring and summer?
And why would they? I mean, right now, this administration, as you stated, look, their policy, they dismantled every effective tool, authority, and policy that the Trump administration that we had put in effect that by February of 2020 had reduced the illegal migration flow by 75%. And the Border Patrol agents you talked to are absolutely right. With the stroke of a political pen, virtually overnight, this administration obliterated all of that. That's why we're seeing last month 178,000 apprehensions in a single month. That's the highest numbers that we've seen in more than 2 decades. And that is back-to-back months we've seen that. In the first 90 days of this administration alone, Border Patrol already saw more apprehensions in the first 90 days of this administration than we saw all of 2020, and it's going in the wrong direction. We're estimating well over 1.5, 1.6 million apprehensions, Dana, and that's just the numbers we're catching. There's an exorbitant amount of what we call gotaways, those individuals getting past the Border Patrol because they are being pulled off the line to do, as those pictures show, provide daycare services for families and unaccompanied minors that this administration has caused.
Do we even know about a lot of the ages of the individuals coming in? Because I know that under the Trump administration, you know, you had the Flores Amendment, and that was, you know, the one of the things that he had paused because people who were, I mean, there were actual stories even from families south of the border that were discussing how children would kind of be used to get people through processing quicker releases. Are we still, is there any safeguard in place for any of those kids? Are we even sure that some of the, you know, the older kids coming through are actually minors or actually juveniles? I mean, do we even have a system under this administration to monitor that data?
Dana, you're asking all the right questions. Absolutely. Under the Trump administration, we had it. The Flores settlement agreement that you mentioned, that's what started the catch and release, because individuals knew if you came to our borders with a family, that was your passport into the country, never to be heard from again. But through the Remain in Mexico program, just one example, President Trump shut that down, turned off that loophole. No longer was a family your passport in the United States. You're absolutely right. What we saw were families, or we call them renta families. Kids were actually being bought and sold to make fake families to get in. That was all eliminated. We shut that down completely. This administration, with the stroke of a pen, turned it all back on. The Remain in Mexico program was obliterated. Catch and release was turned back on. So now we're having the same phenomena we saw in 2019, where if you come to the border as a family or unaccompanied minor, that's your ticket into the country. We had it all solved, and now it's all been undone.
all been undone, and all apparently it's supposed to be in the name of, compassion and caring and helping people. But I look at, just like, for instance, the facilities, and it's not because people are trying to be cruel and keep, children or other adults in tiny facilities. It's just that no country is expected to deal with this kind of issue at the border except for the United States. And so I'm looking at this, I'm like, you have all these kids that are crammed in here. How in the world is it better for them to be crammed into this without their parents at the mercy of adults they don't know, when they could still be at home and at least have a bigger degree of safety, I guess?
Dana, once again, you're spot on. And look, I'll go back even before they get to our country where these overcrowded conditions. On their trek up here, we know independent studies have said up to 30% of women and children are abused on their way up. But on the Mexico side, before they get here, they're shoved in overcrowded, unsanitary stash houses for days and weeks, and tractor trailers. Cartels, if they can't keep up, leave them behind. Countless migrants die every single year. Thousands have to be rescued by Border Patrol. That's before they even get to our border. And now, once they get here, you're right, there's not a single nation on the planet that can actually keep up with 178,000 in a single month. That's 6,000 illegal aliens a day. No country can keep up with that. And what's really frustrating for me, not only did we have this address, and we gave the Biden administration the most secure border this country's ever seen, but we warned them, Dana. DHS alone provided them 200 briefings, the transition team, the majority of which were on border security and illegal immigration. Look, they let their ideologic hubris ignore the experts, ignore the facts, and they did what they did because, in my opinion, they see a perceived political benefit of doing so at the detriment of our national economic security.
Yeah, I'm amazed at this, Mark, at just the way that this has been handled, and also the sort of the optics and the perception of the United States. I had a friend who, and this might be somewhat anecdotal, but it's still true. Her daughter went to go to school in Ireland, for instance, and once she completed her degree of study, Ireland's government said, look, if you're not going to go for higher education, you need to go. We're done with you. Get out. If you can't prove it, then get out. And then we'll show up and walk you to the airport ourselves. Every other country, they seem so much more draconian, I guess, than the United States. So why is it that the United States is the only country on God's green earth that apparently is expected to just disregard sovereignty and borders and just not even allow people to come in an orderly fashion so we can check and make sure that people are who they say they are?
Because, look, we are, as you said, we are the most compassionate, generous country on the face of the planet. We swear in over 1 million migrants to be U.S. citizens. There's not another country on the face of the planet that does that. But what this administration does, look, I've been serving this country for 35 years, Dana, under 6 administrations. I've never seen an administration that has absolutely blatantly, with intent, lied to the American people. So I can understand why the American people are a little bit confused, because the mainstream media, as well as this administration, is filling their head with stuff that just misdirection, spin, and blatant lies about actually what's happening and who's the cause. Look, this DHS Secretary Mayorkas, my final straw, I'm asking for him to be removed. When he testified in front of Congress a couple weeks ago, he continues with his lies to say the border is closed and our borders are secure. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. And he does not take responsibility. And he blames everybody on the face of the sun, to include climate change. But he won't take responsibility for being a chief architect of our open border policies right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned cause as well. And looking at this, Kamala Harris, the border czar for the administration, the VP, she was supposed to go and investigate, Mark. What was the cause of all of this? What is leading to these numbers? It surely couldn't be the fact that they rolled back a lot of this protocol, which just allowed for a free-for-all at the border. It has to be climate change. I'm just looking at the list. There's a bunch of stuff. Climate change and maybe some of the stuff that's happening in some of the triangle countries, et cetera, but not anything, Mark, that this administration has done at all. I'm not quite sure how to take that.
I'll tell you, I tell you how I take it. It's just another series of blatant lies. Look, let me give you a quick statistic to show that climate change. Look, come on, give me a break. Look, in 2020, in February 2020, the monthly apprehensions in April have been down to 17,000 because of the Trump administration. Fast forward 12 months later, 178,000. That's a 900% increase in 12 months. Here's what didn't change. The push factors, the economic conditions, the impact of COVID during that time period, that didn't change. But, last year, in March, April, May, the economic conditions in Northern Triangle countries are pretty much consistent with what they are right now. What did change? This administration obliterated every effective policy that we had in place to deal with the illegal migration crisis. That's the fact. That's the truth. They've created it. They refuse to take responsibility and blame everybody else. It's absurd. It's outrageous, and the American people deserve better.
Last question for you, Mark Morgan. The administration, they're proposing a new budget. We were talking about that on radio today, and they're requesting $1.2 billion for border infrastructure, as well as migrant care and stronger ports of entry. You tell me if you believe that that money is actually going to be distributed for use of border infrastructure and migrant care and all of this other stuff. I mean, what is migrant care even? How's that even defined?
Well, exactly. Well, I'll tell you what. How they're defining it right now: $850 million of taxpayers' money to build a temporary facility to process and release unaccompanied minors as fast as possible. A $500 million contract to house families in hotels to release them into the United States as fast as possible, and then refuse to allow ICE to do their statutory responsibility to lawfully deport them. I tell you, that's where part of it's going to go. But look, I have no. Look, I believe it when I see it, but I have no faith that they're actually going to put this money towards anything that's actually going to help border security. This administration has showed the opposite in everything they've said and done, and the continued lies to the American people.
No, I agree. And so many people are suffering for it, including those people that they claim to care about the most, and which is motivating their actions. It's so sad.